Welcome to the Complete Aerogeek's presentation on how wings really work. Please note, this presentation is not designed for geeks who want to fiddle around in the small decimal places. It is designed to give anyone who wants to understand how wings create lift, the correct principles that are actually at play. While the explanations have been simplified, the underlying science is correct. Enjoy. There are four basic forces that act on an aircraft in flight: lift, weight, thrust, and drag. Thrust is created by the engine and either a propeller or jet thrust. Drag is created by moving the aircraft through the air and making the air do work. Weight is the all-up weight of the aircraft being affected by gravity. Lift is created by the wings. Without lift, we have a car, not an aircraft. So let's look at how wings work. In this module we will look at common explanations about lift creation, the physical laws involved, no maths required, what happens to air around a wing, how lift is created, and why there are many wing shapes. Our resources will include NASA, the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the leading agency in the world for research in aviation and space technology, and Cambridge University. There are three common explanations for how wings produce lift: equal transit time, the skipping stone, and Venturi theory. You may already have a favorite. We will look at each in turn to see how they stack up. The first of these is called equal transit time. This explanation states that the air molecules start out at the leading edge together, and must end up at the trailing edge together. Because a wing is curved on top and flat on the bottom, the upper air has further to go in the same amount of time, and so has to speed up. When the air speeds up, Bernoulli's theorem tells us that its pressure drops, and so the wing is sucked up into the sky. But is any of this true? Let's look at a wing in the wind tunnel to find out. First, let's look at the air streams above and below the wing to see if they start and end together. Follow streamlines number 8 and number 9, on their journey. Oh dear, they never even get close. Now let's see if the air above the wing speeds up faster than the surrounding air, in order to create a lower pressure. If we follow streamline number 9 above the wing, and compare it with the free stream air that is not affected by the wing, we can see that it actually slows down. This is partly because it has become attached to the wing, and has slowed down due to skin friction. Even allowing for the fact that it travels a little further, streamline number 9 is always moving slower than the free stream air above it. So the air above and below the wing never meet up, and the air above the wing travels slower than the air above it. Looks like equal transit time is busted. Now let's look at the skipping stone explanation. This one is tricky because it is partially correct. The lower surface does create a reaction force by interacting with the air, but we know that it takes both surfaces of the wing to create lift. If the upper surface air detaches, either from the wing being stalled or from being contaminated with ice, the aircraft won't be able to maintain level flight. It needs both surfaces working in unison to fly normally. So, the skipping stone explanation is busted as well. 2 down and 1 to go. Finally, let's look at the Venturi explanation. A Venturi is just a tube, with the middle pinched in a bit. The air going into a Venturi enters and must exit at the same pressure, but the middle is much narrower, so to get through the narrowing tube, the air in the middle speeds up and the pressure drops. You can squeeze the end of a garden hose slightly, and see this in action. The Venturi explanation says that because a wing looks like half of a Venturi, the air above a wing speeds up, and the pressure drops, for the same reason, and this creates lift. The problem is that a wing isn't a Venturi. A Venturi is a closed system. The air has nowhere else to go but through the middle. A wing, however, has no constraint above to force this to happen. If you cut a venturi in half, it stops working. There goes the venturi explanation. Both the equal transit time and venturi explanations come about because of misunderstanding of the work of Swiss mathematician Daniel Bernoulli. They usually involve a blanket statement that fast air means lower pressure, but air can be at the same pressure and still be moving very quickly. If you want to test the idea that fast air must mean a lower pressure, stand behind a jet engine at full thrust. Or just take my word for it. Much safer. Another incorrect explanation of a Bernoulli effect is shown here, where blowing over a curved strip of paper makes it rise up. Once again, the claim is that faster air means lower pressure, but we know that is not the case. Remember that jet engine? What this actually demonstrates is air's viscosity, stickiness, and Newton's first law. When we blow with our mouth very close to the paper's surface, the air's natural viscosity, stickiness, causes the airflow to cling to the paper, but the air wants to go in a straight line from the mouth, Newton's first law, not down along the angle of the paper. The argument between gravity wanting to keep the paper hanging down, and the air wanting to stick to the paper and pull it up in line with the airflow, causes the paper to rise up, at an angle about halfway between each force. If you move your mouth slightly away from the paper, the flow doesn't attach to the surface of the paper, and it won't lift. Also, if you tilt your head forward, so your breath is pointed at the ground with the paper hanging vertically, and blow, the paper won't move at all. So, wings don't suck themselves up into the sky, and don't have magic air molecules that always want to stay together. Is there anything else these explanations got wrong? Unfortunately, yes. Both equal transit time and venturi theory assume that wings must be curved on top and flat on the bottom. You can even see this in some school science books, but is this true? Not even close. You probably didn't realize that you were experimenting with aerodynamics when you made your first paper plane or flew your first kite, but that's what you were doing. The simplest wing shape is a flat plate like a paper plane or a kite, and they create plenty of lift with low drag. Hang gliders, parasails and boat sails are single-surface aerofoils. That is, the upper and lower surfaces are one and the same length, and the same shape. Yet the principles and laws behind how aircraft fly are exactly the same for sailboats, paper planes, kites, hang gliders, birds, bats, and just about anything else that flies. So clearly, one magical wing shape is not the main reason for lift creation. That's one more myth that bites the dust. It gets even more interesting when we look at aircraft wings. Depending on the speed range of the aircraft, the wing shape can be very different from what you might expect. There are many variations of wing profiles, and here are three of the most common. Low speed means we don't have very much force from speed, so we must move a large amount of air through a steep and rapid change of direction to stay up. Low-speed aircraft usually have wings with a high camber and large flaps to achieve this. The upper surface camber does a lot of the work. Medium-speed, modern turboprop airliners have wings that are usually a symmetrical profile, that is, with the same curve, top and bottom. Jet airliners have supercritical wings, which are more curved on the bottom than on top, and this helps reduce drag at high speeds. High speed, we have a lot of force from our airspeed, and we only need to move the air through a shallow angle, think water skiing, so high-speed aircraft have much thinner wings, even flat, with low or no camber, and rely on powerful flaps and slats for lift at low speed. So, we have demolished the common explanations for lift, and the idea that all wings are the same, so how does lift work? To answer that, in a simple way, we must remind ourselves of the laws of motion, discovered 3.5 centuries ago, by one of the greatest geniuses that ever lived. Meet Sir Isaac Newton. Newton was simply one of the greatest geniuses ever to walk the earth. He formulated the theory of gravity and his laws of motion between 1666 and 1686. These laws, and his other discoveries, govern everything from the orbits of planets, stars and galaxies, to rockets, flight and even golf. He also invented calculus, so now you know who to blame. Newton's laws are called laws, for a reason. No matter what we do on Earth, we can't avoid them. Except perhaps at the quantum level. They are still used to calculate trajectories and orbits for space flight. Because they are universal, Newton's laws can be used to calculate lift force, and to explain why it happens. Bernoulli's theorem was based on Newton's second law. Newton's laws are not negotiable in the study of motion, and because of this and that they are easy to understand, we will use them to see how lift works. If your understanding of lift disagrees with Newton, it's time to look for another explanation. Let's remind ourselves of Newton's laws. Newton's first law says, an object's motion, or lack of motion, will remain constant, unless the force acting on it changes. Translation: sleeping in every day might feel good, until you lose your job. Newton's second law says, the force required to move an object is proportional to its weight, or mass, and how fast we want to move it. Translation: you can push a little mass a long way quickly, or a lot of mass a short way very slowly. Newton's third law says, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Translation: no one is your friend on a seesaw. So, what do Newton's laws tell us about how lift is created? Simply, that lift is a reaction force, created by a wing bending the air. When we push on the air, by moving through it, it pushes back. If we move a wing through the air at an angle, it will push the air down, and the wing will go up. You have probably proven this effect many times, without realizing it. If you have ever stuck your hand out of a car window and inclined it to the air, you have felt your hand being pushed upwards. This is basically how lift works, from paper planes to jumbo jets. You push the air, and it pushes back. Newton's third law. Bend the air around a wing downwards, with enough force, and your wing goes up. The reaction force varies with speed, the mass of air moved or the angle of change. Newton's second law. The angle of the wing to the oncoming air is called the angle of attack. AOA is the most critical part of creating lift. Not enough AOA, and you won't fly. Too much, and you will fall out of the sky. You can increase the lift force by increasing the angle of attack, or if at a shallower angle, by increasing the speed of the wing through the air. So apart from Sir Isaac Newton and his laws of motion, who else agrees with this explanation? These guys. And every paper plane you have ever made, or kite you have flown. Of course, this is a simplified explanation, and shortly, we will look at what actually happens round a wing and why. The same change of flow direction that enables aircraft to fly also works for sailboats. A sail is just a piece of material that takes up a shape as the air flows over it. The sailor can adjust the angle of the sail to the wind, angle of attack, increasing or decreasing lift, in the same way as we do with a wing. The red lines are the lift reaction force, just as we see over a wing. The sideways force of the lift is balanced by the keel and rudder, in blue, and so the boat goes forwards, instead of sideways. So, as we now know, wing shape is not the main reason for lift. Angle of attack and air bending is, but how exactly does it work? Let's look at our wind tunnel images again, and see how each surface contributes to lift creation. We will look at this from the still air, moving wing perspective, as in real life. Starting below the wing, we can see that as the wing comes into contact with streamline number 8, it pushes it downwards and forwards, in the direction of the wing's movement. This creates a reaction force, that is upwards and backwards. Newton's third law. This is what you can feel on your palm, when your hand is out of the car window. The upwards reaction force is lift, and the backwards or rearwards force is induced drag. Now let's look at the air above the wing. What happens here is a little more complicated. We can see that as streamline number 9 meets the wing, it goes up and over the leading edge, and then gets bent downwards, and pulled forwards, in the direction of the wing's movement. The bending down, and pulling forwards, creates a reaction force that Newton's third law tells us, is upwards and backwards. The upwards force is lift, and the backwards or rearwards force is induced drag. But why does the air bend downwards, and not continue in a straight line? Two factors act on the air, to ensure it follows the upper surface of the wing. The first is atmospheric pressure. Atmospheric pressure acts on every surface, and the top of a wing is no different. Atmospheric pressure tries to hold the air against the wing's surface. The second and critical factor is air's natural viscosity or stickiness. The layer closest to the wing, called the boundary layer, is attached to the wing's skin and follows the curve. Remember that paper experiment, and the argument between gravity and the air wanting to continue straight? It created an upwards force. Same here. If air was not sticky like this, we wouldn't be able to fly. We know this because when ice forms on a wing's upper surface, even in very small amounts, it can cause the boundary layer to detach from the wing and the upper surface stalls. This has caused more than a few aircraft accidents over the years. Please note that the Coanda effect is not the reason the air follows the upper surface. This is another myth. Coanda does not work in non-accelerated flows, if at all. It is only associated with augmented lift, such as in upper surface blowing. So, in looking at the flow around the wing, we can see that the wing rapidly pushes the still air, in the direction of its movement, from right to left here, and both surfaces work to bend the airflow downwards, creating an upwards lift force. The lift force must exceed the force of gravity, acting on the aircraft's mass, in order for us to take off. To maintain level flight, lift must equal weight, mass. To climb, lift must exceed weight, mass. In slow flight, the wing imparts less energy to the air, so we need more angle of attack, or must use flaps, to create the same lift force. For high-speed flight, we have lots of energy, so we need less angle of attack. Finally, if we imagine the wing still, and the air moving, we can clearly see that the difference in the speeds of the air above and below the wing is not really due to the upper air speeding up, relative to the surrounding air, but to the lower surface of the wing, rapidly slowing the air.
So is that it? The wing bends the air? What about all that stuff my flying instructor made me memorize, about pressures above and below the wing, making lift happen?
The pressure differences we see above and below a wing are primarily the result of lift creation, not the cause. The speed of the aircraft, its mass and size and the angle of attack, create the kinetic energy and bending force applied to the air, to create lift. This action, when combined with the air density, pressure and temperature, changes the pressure of the local air, where the atmosphere and the aircraft interact. This can vary significantly all over the aircraft. In fact, pressure differences between the upper and lower surfaces of the wing are largely a result of angle of attack, as the underside of the wing faces the oncoming air, and the upper surface is in its shadow. Importantly, an increase in pressure does not mean the air is compressed, just that the air is pushed. To understand how an aircraft affects the local air pressure around it, we need to see it as a solid object that displaces air, just like a submarine does water. Imagining an aircraft flying underwater is an effective way of understanding what is happening. Air is a gas that behaves like a fluid, and exactly the same rules apply. There are several ways that this pushing and pulling causes pressure changes around a wing. If we look at the wind tunnel image below, we can see that even before the air gets to the leading edge, it has already started slowing down and bending. But why? This is the wing's bow wave at work. It pushes against the air, slowing and bending it before the wing arrives, exactly like the bow wave of a ship. This shows again that the air is slowing down, not speeding up, as it approaches the wing. The bow wave or pressure wave, made by an aircraft, can be quite significant. During aerial refueling, if the receiving aircraft is large enough, its pressure wave actually pushes the tail of the tanker up, and this can be felt by the crew. Interestingly, when an aircraft goes fast enough, it starts to outrun its bow wave and a shock wave forms. At this point, we begin to go supersonic, but that is a story for another time. We have seen how the pressure increases in front of an aircraft or a wing, when its movement angle and displacement causes a bow wave, and that the lower surface of a wing faces the dynamic pressure of the oncoming air, and bends it downwards, increasing the local pressure. But what about the low pressure above a wing? Well, that is created in a couple of ways. Firstly, because of the angle of attack, much of the upper surface is hidden from the dynamic pressure of the oncoming air, so the local air pressure is already lower. This can be seen as the blue area in the CFD image. Secondly, as the air approaches the leading edge, it is divided. A large amount goes under the wing, but some is pushed forwards and upwards. As it travels over the leading edge, the angle of the upper leading edge and the wing's increasing thickness forces it rapidly upwards, causing the local pressure to increase. This effect can be seen with the submarine in the picture opposite, and as the yellow and red areas in the CFD image. Then, as the air turns the corner and heads downhill, the wing also begins getting thinner. This abrupt change of direction of the attached flow causes a pressure density drop, and the decrease in the wing's thickness allows the air to rush in and fill the space where the wing was. This further lowers the local pressure, as shown in the blue areas in the CFD image. Here is an image of a swimmer's arm being moved through the water, and we can see the same effects. The arm is rotated to form a wing-like profile, and as it moves through the water, its angle of attack, movement and displacement creates a bow wave, and increases the pressure in front of and under the arm. By pushing the water out of the way, it creates a lower pressure behind the arm, along its upper surface, a bit like standing behind a building on a windy day. The water that is pushed up and over the leading edge rushes into the low pressure area, and this helps push the arm along. The same happens with a wing. Please note that the visible cavity behind the arm is for illustration, and is only visible because we are near the surface of the water. No cavities or vacuums like this are possible in air, just a lower pressure. On a humid day, we can actually see the lower pressure area forming over the upper surface of an aircraft's wing. As we have discussed, the rapid change in direction of the airflow, combined with the sudden drop in pressure and density of the air, causes a drop in temperature, and the moisture in the air condenses, forming a fog above the wing. The steeper the angle of attack, the bigger the pressure difference between the upper and lower surfaces, and the more dramatic the change from higher to lower pressure, as the air turns the corner. When fighters pull up or turn rapidly, the rapid increase in angle of attack will also create this effect. But if angle of attack is the main reason for lift, can we have too much? Unfortunately, yes. When the angle of attack is too high, the upper air cannot turn the corner, and it tumbles in a circular vortex. This is called a stall. It is hard to see here, because the nice neat streamlines have swirled together. Ironically, the pressure difference between the upper and lower surfaces is very high, and should mean lots of lift, but because the upper airstream has detached from the wing, it is not contributing any lift, only drag. Notice that the lower surface is still making plenty of lift, just not enough to maintain level flight, so the aircraft descends. How do you fix this? Easy. Just lower the nose. As soon as the upper air can turn the corner again, the flow reattaches to the wing and you are flying. If we now combine what we have explored, we know that lift occurs when a wing bends the air downwards. Both surfaces of the wing work to change the angle of the airflow. To fly, an aircraft must bend air downwards with a force at least equal to the force of gravity acting on the aircraft. To climb, the force applied to the air must exceed the force of gravity acting on the aircraft. The amount of lift is determined by the angle the air is changed to, angle of attack, and the speed of the wing through the air, Newton's second law. The higher the speed, the lower the angle required. You can also increase AOA by lowering flaps, as AOA is measured as a straight line from the leading edge to the trailing edge. Easy, huh? Yes, it's the incomparable Concorde. For 30 years it flew profitably for British Airways, and proved that smart people really can break barriers. Daily, it flashed through the stratosphere, at 60,000 feet, at twice the speed of sound, crossing the Atlantic, in just 3 hours, not the 7 required by its more plodding brethren. In a future presentation, your Complete Aerogeek will explain exactly how it did that. But for now, a brief look at its tubby, but very efficient, if 800 mph slower, successor. This, of course, is the A380, and now you know how it hefts its 580-ton bulk into the skies. We hope you enjoyed the journey. Here is the Cambridge University video, from which we took the still frames. Watch carefully, as the air flows round the wing.